like to introduce Alex McIsaac. He is the Senior Researcher Coordinator at the Samara Center for Democracy. His work focuses on technology's influence on Canadian democracy and civic engagement, digital platform governance, and pro-social design, and mitigating digital information threats. He currently is the project coordinator for Verified and previously led the SAMBOT project from 2022 to 2025. Alex is a graduate of McMaster University's Master of Public Policy in Digital Social Society program, where his research focused on digital privacy law, digital democracy, and the spread of dis and misinformation online, all within a Canadian context. He also holds a Bachelor of Arts in Applied Communications, Leadership, and Culture from the University of Prince Edward Island. Through holding previous working roles in research, communications, public affairs, and municipal government, Alex has had experience working within both the nonprofit sector and public service. Beyond online discourse, Alex is passionate about issues surrounding equity within public education, digital literacy, and youth engagement. And that's quite the background. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Alex. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Rahul. And thank you for having me. And thanks everybody for joining us for the digital session tonight. So I'm just going to share my screen quickly and get started. Trust that everybody can see that. Okay, cool. Thank you for the thumbs up. All right. So yes, hi everybody. So I'm Alex McIsaac, and I am a senior research coordinator at the Samara Center for Democracy, like Rahul introduced me. And so I'm originally from Eastern Ontario. But I'm joining you folks today from Halifax, Nova Scotia. So hello from the East Coast. And so my work and my background focuses on the relationships between technology, society, and democracy. And that's what I'm here to talk to you about today. And so I got a little brief agenda for you of what my presentation is going to touch on today. First, I want to give you some background on how social media is actively harming Canadian democracy today. I'm going to talk about why social media platforms keep getting worse. The discourse keeps getting worse instead of stopping or mitigating harm. I'm going to talk about what are digital information threats, things like disinformation, and astroturfing. I'll help define those terms and talk about where we encounter them. And then to conclude, I want to talk about how we can fix these problems, how we can fix them collectively as a country, but also, what can you individually do to make online discussions better and safer in this moment? So I'm going to introduce our organization a little bit that I come from, that I work for. So I'm part of an organization called the Samara Center. The Samara Center for Democracy. And so we're a nonpartisan national charity, and we're dedicated to strengthening Canadian democracy. We want to make it easier for people to talk about and participate in politics, basically. And so we do this through producing research, hosting events, and programs aimed at enabling civic engagement in Canada. And so for many years, Canadians have discussed that they felt that political conversations, or really any kind of conversations online, were getting more and more hostile. And we observed the same feelings and trends, but found that there were very few people who were trying to measure this increasing hostility. And even fewer were doing it in a Canadian context. So back in 2021, our research team at the Samara Center started the SAMBOT project. And through this project, we would monitor tweets sent to political candidates and parties during Canadian elections. And we would then use machine learning to evaluate how likely these tweets were to be toxic or abusive in nature. And so over the years, we monitored over 4 million tweets across 12 different Canadian elections. This was including federal, provincial, and municipal elections, all over the country. And so I wanted to share that after this 3.5 years of SAMBOT research, here are the big overarching findings to kind of boil down what we found for you folks today. So the first one is that online abuse is everywhere. It's common, it's pervasive, and it's frankly unavoidable. So no matter if you're running to be a local school board trustee, to be a city councillor, a member of provincial parliament, or the Prime Minister of Canada themselves. We knew going into this project that online abuse was likely very common in political discussions, but we did find some more surprising findings. One is that abuse is common at all levels of government, even very local politics. And additionally, it's not just longtime politicians who are facing significant abuse, like we may think. We found that even first-time candidates who had never run for office previously faced significant abuse online in many cases. Our second big overarching finding of our Sandbot research is that there's likely a significant amount of inauthentic behavior online that could be manipulating online discussions. This behavior is potentially conducted using bots by foreign and domestic interest groups or foreign governments, which may be skewing public opinion and individual beliefs amongst Canadians. And so all of these things make civic engagement more difficult and more hostile in the process potentially. And it risks making it more difficult for us to all understand each other and exist in a shared reality. And then all of these harms are sadly, because of potentially artificial engagement rather than real human behavior. And so in our work, we found signs that make it appear as if inauthentic behavior online is common, but our data can't give us an idea of how much power inauthentic content may have over constituents, over people. And so we do, however, have some ideas about how very small groups of users can really control an online discussion. During the 2023 Alberta provincial election, for example, we found that 12% of all online engagement we monitored came from just 200 users. And that 12% of all abusive tweets we monitored came from just 50 users. So these are such small groups of people potentially who are able to command so much attention or drive so much abuse over an online space. And we're actually doing some research recently with our new verified project around this election that we're finding we're seeing some similar findings around how it's on that platform as well. It's a very small group of users who are actually engaging with content online. And so this doesn't tell us about the reach that inauthentic or artificial users could have, but it clarifies for us that these artificial users could easily have significant influence over online discussions compared to your average real person who posts at an ordinary volume, at a more ordinary volume. And so evaluating and measuring these problems of inauthenticity is difficult for researchers like us because we don't have access to much data about what goes on social media platforms. And lately, a lot of platforms have really started to limit the data that they do provide publicly even further. And so it's really difficult for researchers like us to understand the impact of things like inauthentic behavior and what they have on society and our politics because these platforms shut us out. And so I have one more big overarching finding to talk about with our Sandbot project, and that's we noticed that certain narratives kept coming up and correlating with some of the highest periods of engagement and abuse during entire election periods. The most evident was topics related to LGBTQ+ rights. And so we observed across three of the elections we monitored, that being the Ottawa municipal elections in 2022, the 2023 mayoral by-election in Toronto, and the 2023 Alberta provincial election, that some of the highest spikes in engagement surrounded tweets that related to LGBTQ+ issues. And I want everybody to keep in mind, just for context around these three elections, that at the time when these elections were ongoing and that we were tracking these things, LGBTQ+ rights and issues largely weren't being discussed between candidates or political parties. They weren't mainstream election issues at the time in any of these cases. But nonetheless, we found that when candidates would make positive, negative, or neutral tweets referencing LGBTQ plus people or issues, that much higher levels of engagement or abuse, big spikes in engagement or abuse would consistently follow. And what happens online informs the offline world and vice versa. And so what we're seeing at the same time as monitoring this increase in engagement and abuse towards surrounding LGBTQ plus issues is that there's been observed increased hate, violence, and threats towards LGBTQ plus people and communities in Canada offline. And we're also seeing hate against these groups rising internationally as well, outside of Canada and for a long time. We know that in other regions, like in Europe, for example, that foreign anti-LGBTQ plus hate campaigns have been caught trying to influence public opinion online. And that some recent journalistic investigations in Canada have questioned if this is happening here as well. It makes us want to question, what's come first here? Grassroots hate within Canada, or maybe is this stemming from artificial hate and outrage coming from elsewhere? Either way, these hateful narratives are having real world consequences for Canadians who are LGBTQ plus. And this example with this topic shows how hate against any particular marginalized group or conversation even surrounding any particular political issue can be reinforced and spread and normalized through online influence and potential inauthentic behavior. So just to recap quickly, in short, our Sandbox project tells us a few main things. Basically, everyone's receiving abuse in a political context. There's likely a lot of fake and inauthentic engagement skewing popularity and skewing public opinion online, and that hateful narratives are driving engagement online, even when the hate isn't particularly part of the election discussion. And this is likely helping normalize hateful beliefs that oppose human rights and even maybe are driving violence and intimidation. And so these problems are democratic threats. Abusive and toxic online discussions threaten our democracy because an abusive and negative climate stops people from participating in politics and in civic life more broadly. We conducted a study back in 2019 where we found that 47% of Canadian social media users choose to stay out of political discussions because they fear being criticized. And additionally, that 41% of respondents don't feel safe sharing their political views online. It's a safety issue. Keep in mind that these are our findings from 2019. The next year, I think we all know what happened in 2020. That was when the pandemic began. And we have a lot of Canadian and international research to back up that online conduct has significantly worsened, and outrage and abuse online has significantly increased since that year of 2020. So we hypothesize that it's really likely that if we redid this survey today, those very high percentages of Canadians who fear being criticized or feel unsafe sharing their political views online would likely be even higher. This is all really bad for democracy and for civic engagement, because the more fear and avoidance people have around political discussions, the more disengaged and apathetic they're likely to be. Democracy requires people to be able to be engaged in their communities locally and nationally, which is why improving our online discourse is so vital to protecting and strengthening our democracy here in Canada right now in this moment. This is also stopping people from considering running for office, and is making elected officials, who maybe would have otherwise continued to run for office and stay in their elected position, quit politics earlier than they would have otherwise. Threats to public officials have completely skyrocketed. and one of the biggest problems here is that this abuse is particularly affecting the people who are most likely to face hate based on their identity or their demographics. These are groups of people that are already underrepresented in our politics. So online abuse is now adding additional barriers to participation for the people who already face the most adversity towards entering a political position or running for office. So, this culture of online abuse is making diverse representation an even bigger hurdle, a bigger challenge right now. So you folks today, well, I'm not sure, but I assume you're probably not elected officials or political candidates. But I bet you either experience or observe abusive behavior online on a regular basis. Maybe that's in a political context, maybe that's in a pop culture context, or in communities related to your own interests, or just around local community groups or your close social groups. A lot of people pose this question of like, is all of this online abuse because people are just naturally abusive towards each other? Is this a human nature thing? Is social media kind of doomed to devolve into hateful and harmful attacks towards each other? We don't think so, and I'm going to explain why. We think so because social media platforms actually support and encourage and incentivize abusive, inflammatory, or upsetting content on their platforms. At least most of them do, and most of the major platforms that Canadians use do. And to answer why they do this, it's because it's what's most profitable. When users comment back and forth in an argument, that drives engagement and thus keeps people on a platform and is profitable for that social media platform. And then it goes even deeper because these platforms start recommending and incentivizing content towards users that continues to outrage them and drives them deeper into this kind of cycle of anger and upset and outrage. And so the quickest example of where this is working to kind of incite and incentivize outrage goes to Facebook. And so on Facebook, users are able to react to posts or comments with a few different emojis. They can give a post a like, or a heart reaction, or a laughing reaction, etc. There's a number of these, and one of those is this anger react I have on the screen here, and this angry emoji. And so a few years ago, an investigation found that Facebook was boosting or weighting content that received angry reactions up to 5 times higher than it did for posts that got the default like reaction. And so this meant that posts that received angry responses were being intentionally shared by Facebook farther and faster than other kinds of content. And so this is maybe the most blatant example of what is the most popular social media platform amongst Canadians, Facebook, rewarding and intentionally spreading anger and abuse. And these algorithmic systems then get more complex and learn and know to boost certain narratives or topics that they know will help cause outrage and receive these angry reactions as well. And then on another level, the social media users, the people using social media, can then profit from this outrage and anger themselves. I don't know if people have heard of the term rage baiting, but this is a phenomenon where people online will even intentionally drum up outrage in order to garner engagement and thus profit and popularity online, kind of game this system of promoting outrage. And this kind of behavior certainly extends right into our political discussions as well. And so these kinds of incentive problems are the reasons that we have this toxic online culture, frankly. People are not the problem. Canadians are not the problem. It's the systems that underpin these social media platforms that are driving and causing and expanding these problems of abuse and hate. And these harmful, profit-driven incentives help spread other kinds of harmful content online too, like disinformation. So before I go any further, I want to define a couple terms for everyone, because these terms I find can get typically conflated or confused often in these kinds of discussions. So I have 3 terms for you, and that is misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation. And so misinformation is information that's false, but it's not shared with the intent to mislead people. The intent isn't to manipulate or dissuade people. It's shared with actual, genuine intent. If most ordinary individuals online are sharing misinformation rather than disinformation. False information that's shared is considered misinformation when people genuinely believe themselves that what they're sharing is true, but it isn't. So while misinformation is done without bad intentions, disinformation is. Disinformation is when false information is intentionally created or shared with the goal of misleading people. And these kinds of behaviors could be done by tons of people, by interest groups. This could be done by foreign agents who want to try to confuse and make Canadians believe untrue things, or other kinds of actors who just wish to manipulate public opinion or certain groups of people. And so that's kind of the difference between mis and disinformation. But we have a third term here that I find is really usually not discussed, but I think is highly important to be conscious of, and that's malinformation. And so this is information that's shared that is not actually false. This is actually real information, but the way that it's shared is in a way that's disingenuous or intentionally confusing, with the goal of having people take away a false belief from this piece of content. So for example, if a manipulative actor with negative intentions online shared a video of a local, what they purport to be a local incident, and they're saying, here's a video of what's happening today downtown, but really it's a video from years ago, or maybe it's a video not even from the place they're purporting it, the video was taken. That would be an example of malinformation. Or another one would be, taking a video, sharing a clip of a political candidate at a debate, and intentionally cutting that video up to remove context and making it seem, through manipulating that video, that the candidate was saying something or making a point that they really didn't intend, because you've taken out some of that context. So that's what malinformation is. And these things are common online as well. And so mis, and malinformation are affecting Canadians and are stopping them from living in a shared reality. How can we all talk about real issues affecting our country if we can't even agree on what's actually happening in Canada or what issues are even real? I think it's really important to remember that falling for disinformation of any kind is something that we all do. It's something that no matter your level of digital literacy or your background or your demographics, it can and will probably happen. And I want to say, if you fall for disinformation, it's not your fault if you're accidentally falling for this, because these social media platforms are, again, intentionally promoting, salacious disinformation on their platforms into your news feeds, because the engagement that it drives, again, is profitable, and trying to reduce the amount of disinformation shared would harm their profits. So really, like, the cards are stacked against us So as much as I urge you to try your best to avoid sharing disinformation, I just want to recognize that it is a really difficult thing to do. And so abuse and disinformation aren't the only problems online, not by a long shot. And so I talked about this a little bit earlier, and recent research has been monitoring inauthentic behavior online, which we think could be regularly tying into these problems of both abuse and disinformation. So what does that mean? So inauthentic behavior can look like a lot of different things. For example, bot accounts are examples of inauthentic behavior, or inflating a post's likes or shares or comments to boost its engagement. So is someone pretending to be someone they aren't online. These are all methods of inauthentic behavior, and they can all be used for nefarious or anti-democratic means, namely for something called astroturfing. So I'm going to define this term because I find it's something that not a lot of people have heard of, but would know what it is once it's defined and have probably encountered it themselves. And so astroturfing is the practice of hiding who the sponsors of a message are to try to make it appear as though the message or the post or the comment originates from and is supported by grassroots participants, real people holding real opinions. And so astroturfing is done in an attempt to deliberately manipulate public opinion widely. And so you're probably encountering astroturfing all the time online. When a celebrity boosts their follower account using bots, that's astroturfing. When people, content creators online, pay for fake engagement to boost maybe their views or their likes or comments so they get more reach on a platform, that's also astroturfing. Or when a company or a business posts fake reviews online to try to make their online review scores look better, that's also astroturfing. And so in those cases, it's done for profit or popularity, but these same kinds of aims can and are happening in the political sphere as well. Astroturfing can help spread dis and misinformation. It can make it seem like certain groups or movements are more or less popular than they really are. Or it can be used to help sabotage real grassroots movements and help delegitimize them. So like abuse, astroturfing is bad for democracy, it's bad for society, but it also drives more engagement and, again, more profit for social media companies. So they don't have that incentive to combat astroturfing at scale. And so all of these online harms and information threats are seeping into how we interact in the real world. Research shows that the state of online abuse and disinformation, inauthentic behavior, and just the overall online media environment are really changing how we interact offline. And social media platforms like Facebook and Twitter have been shown to promote a phenomenon called affective polarization. And so this is different than just regular polarization. So just to define quickly, polarization is just when people or groups have strongly divergent opinions on an issue. In a democracy, polarization isn't a bad thing. It's perfectly healthy and normal for issues, groups, or parties or platforms to be polarized on certain things. However, affective polarization is dangerous for democracy. And so this is a phenomenon where individuals' feelings and emotions towards who they think their own group or their own political unit are become much more positive, while at the same time, their feelings towards members of who they see to be opposing groups or people in opposition to them and their political unit becomes increasingly negative and increasingly hostile. And this phenomenon we're seeing is actively making Canadians see themselves as more divided and in opposition towards each other, and to develop negative associations with people who have differing political views. These social media platforms are literally encouraging Canadians to drive themselves apart from each other. Platforms like Facebook and Twitter, for example, help drive effective polarization by promoting that divisive political content. and through the content recommendation systems that they have. And so everybody has a different news feed. They get different content recommended or promoted towards them. And so when certain users online are being fed content that consistently, for better or for worse, confirms only their own beliefs and their own opinions, even if those opinions may be based on disinformation, while at the same time also promoting the more angry, upsetting, and polarizing segments of those discussions, of course, we end up with a more divided population. It's part of our media diet. And through, and even though division online is likely helping make us actually more divided, research finds that Canadians tend to, even in this moment, agree on a lot. Research is finding that Canadians are consistently assuming that they're more divided on issues, when in reality, they aren't that divided at all. This is something called the political perception gap, and we think that effective polarization enabled by social media is helping make that perception gap wider. So one thing I really want to drive home in this presentation is that social media is not a quality representation of reality. It skews and manipulates and gives voices to the loudest, not the most popular or the most thoughtful or the most truthful. It's helping drive hatred and abuse, and it's confusing all of us about what our neighbors and fellow Canadians actually think and feel and believe. So I've talked a lot so far about problems, about threats. And so now I want to conclude by talking about some solutions and actions that we can take collectively and individually. So we have all these problems, and we know that the owners of these platforms have no interest in fixing these problems because they profit off these problems. And also, these companies aren't Canadian, so they have, frankly, not much need to care about our democracy. So what can we do? At a national level, we think we really need social media regulation. And so we find that when a lot of people talk or think about what internet or social media regulation can be, they think that everything exists on this kind of binary 2D scale. We think that, or maybe think or have been told that, all we can do is just move the dial along the scale to either be more or less restrictive. They think that we can either increase regulation, but in the process reduce free expression, or do the opposite, increase free expression and reduce regulation. But we're here to say that that narrative is misguided, and frankly is what the social media platforms want you to believe. We actually have ways that we can increase regulation while also preserving and actually potentially improving free expression on these platforms. And we can do all of this through changing the incentives and design of social media platforms so that instead of profit being the #1 important goal, user safety, social good, and civic engagement have to be considered and protected foremost. And so we call this designing for pro-social behavior, designing to incentivize users to be social, productive, and collaborative, not antisocial, angry, and hostile like they are right now. And so many governments around the world like ours are proposing regulation like this that would work towards these goals. And we're hoping at the Samara Center that, whatever the outcome of this next election, that our next Canadian federal government takes action on the online harms issue in this way very quickly by targeting, how can we incentivize more pro-social behavior? And so when I'm talking about like design requirements or changing the design of social media, I'm going to take us offline first to talk about how design can help improve spaces and make them safer and more cohesive. So this is a picture of a city street, and this street is really far from a free-for-all. It's not just kind of like a big open plain with tons of lanes that it really doesn't have rules or lines or whatever. It has lines on the street. It has curbs and dividers. We have separated bike lanes to keep different modes of transportation separated. We have more space for pedestrians to cross and wait to cross safely on the separated island. These are all design decisions that both make sure that traffic flows better and makes it safer for drivers, pedestrians, everyone. And it helps make the entire ecosystem of the city that this infrastructure is in more cohesive. And so this reality about how traffic can and movement can be made more safe and more accessible through better design mirrors how we think social media should be designed. Streets aren't unsafe. Poorly designed streets are unsafe. Social media doesn't have to be full of outrage and hate and polarization. It can be made pro-social and productive instead, with different incentives and design goals. Right now, we don't have design rules that require social media platforms to have their equivalents of crosswalks or lane markings or traffic signals. It's really a free-for-all and up to the platform owners, and we all get hurt because of it. So I'm gonna help you imagine what some of these really basic design changes could be that could help shift incentives on social media platforms. So I talked about Facebook and all of these different reactions that you could do. So on different platforms, there's only a handful of ways that we can signal how we want to react to a post or comment. We have a couple choices on Facebook. On Reddit, we can either upvote or downvote something. And on most other platforms, we can really just like or heart something or not, and to signal support or opposition. So these are pretty simple ways to react, and we could potentially add new types of reactions that could promote positive and productive engagement. So a design change here could be that we could add some pro-social reactions, as we call them. So for example, we could add a thank you reaction to promote positive and pro-social behavior. If you see a post or comment that you want to say thank you to for someone sharing something, you could click and add that reaction. And maybe we could even learn from this Facebook example about the angry emoji reaction and flip it to actually promote positive engagement instead, and boost in Facebook's recommendation system content that gets more thank you reactions to bring that positive engagement farther and wider rather than the negative and angry. We could also add a respect reaction to help oppose effective polarization, arguing, and excessively partisan behavior. This could again boost content that breeds respectful and civil dialogue rather than outrage. And we think that if you give people more ways to be able to be agreeable and more civil, then they'll choose to do so. And there's probably tons of different types of reactions and interactions that could help improve platforms as well. And so another thing that we could do to reduce the amount of polarizing or upsetting content that most people see online is by giving users more personal control, more autonomy over the algorithms and their own social media feeds about what content they're seeing. Most social media platforms don't even let users control any parts of their feeds or their news feeds, and the ones that do are typically pretty limited in their features. So this wouldn't even mean that we need to get rid of content recommendations or anything like that. It would just be about giving users more control and more autonomy over their recommendations, rather than having content that may be abusive or harmful thrust upon them. They can choose to say no to that kind of content. And as one last example, here's a neat idea for reducing anger or public shaming or division, and showing solidarity, even in situations where it may be feel unsafe to do so publicly. So imagine if when you're commenting, you had the option to reply to somebody's comment privately. You could use this to signal silent support for someone who's maybe receiving hate through this feature, or in a different scenario, you could use this feature to really try and diffuse a divisive or abusive discussion that's going on online. So these are a few of these examples of design decisions that would give people more options rather than less, and can make our online discussions safer and more cohesive in the process. So these are things that we can suggest collectively that we want, the federal government to encourage and enact through policy, but that's something that we're waiting on from our government. But what can we do, as individuals? What actions can you folks take, actively right now? We're in an election period. We're having political conversations on the regular. And so I have a list of a couple of things that I hope you folks can learn from or take away or encourage others to do out of this presentation. And so the first is just to be aware of the threats that I talked to you about today, and to be aware of the incentives that underpin these social media companies and how they work. I find that really helps people understand and navigate online spaces. Understanding terms like astroturfing or what is disinformation, and just knowing what's out there and how manipulative actors and users tend to act, and just knowing the possibilities of where this malicious information or disinformation is being shared or how. I'll also say being a good digital bystander, and I'll explain what that means. If someone was actively being abused or berated in real life, we imagine that a good bystander would intervene in a case where it was safe for them to do so, of course. And so, we think that users online should maybe consider taking that notion and bringing it into the online world. If it's safe for you to intervene in an online discussion where someone or a group of people are being abused or threatened, intervening can help limit those behaviors and shift the conversation, and help make sure that frequent abusers online know that their conduct isn't endorsed by who is the usually silent majority, which is most of us online. And this also means that debunking disinformation where possible is something that that's part of being a good bystander. Everyone has different topics and experiences that we're all knowledgeable about. So I'd encourage you, if you're seeing disinformation spread about something that you're knowledgeable on, that you take the opportunity to try to quickly educate others and debunk that disinformation. But again, I say only if it feels safe for you to do so, because I understand that for many folks, it's not always necessarily safe to do. And so next, I want you to remember that these are systemic problems, and that misinformed voters or misguided voters aren't the problem here. It's the fault of a harmful information ecosystem. So if you see your neighbors sharing misinformation, I encourage you to give them grace and remember that the power of social media platforms are against them and are against you. Try your best not to get angry with them or upset, and try to do your best to educate instead. I'll also say, especially during this election period, try to go off social media platforms and verify information with trusted and with diverse sources, whether that's different news sites, or what have you. What goes on social media platforms is not necessarily representative of reality and is not necessarily well-sourced or well-researched. And I'll also say, try to get offline and talk to your neighbors and friends and people just different from yourself about this election and politics more widely. Social media puts us all in echo chambers, where we're seeing things that we maybe agree with, or seeing things only from people who are like us. And real life conversations break us out of those echo chambers and expose us to more diverse and representative views. And I'll also remind you that, politicians are dealing with, and political parties are dealing with this problem of a manipulated public opinion online. They don't know they're maybe also really confused and misguided about what people believe or feel in this moment. And so I compel you to reach out to them, reach out to your elected officials or political candidates during this federal election period, either in real life or on the phone or by email or traditional mail, to make your voice heard so that your views can hopefully ground them and contribute to their understanding of public opinion. So that concludes my presentation, but I'll take a quick second before we go into the Q&A to just plug our new research initiative at the Samara Center called Verified. We're actively looking into online discussions across social media platforms, multiple different platforms, Reddit, YouTube, Blue Sky. During this federal election. And so we've put out 3 reports already in the last few weeks, and we have more to come before we get to election day. So you can go to our website right now, samaracenter.ca. You can sign up for our newsletter for updates, or read our report on this new project on our website. All this is an expansion of that technology and democracy work that I was describing at the top of our presentation session today. So thank you all so much for your time and attention tonight. If anyone would ever like to check out our work, you can find us at our website. And if anybody wants to reach out to me specifically, I'd be happy to chat. My email is up on the screen here, alex@samaracenter.ca. And so if anybody wants to follow up, please do. I'd be happy to talk further. And yeah, thank you for your time and attention. And I'm happy to move into the Q&A now.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Alex. That was quite informative. I'll start off with one quick question that started in the chat, which is also a great way for people to confirm information. But they asked about the Samara Center for Democracy and asking about the funding. What is driving your work at the moment?
Driving, sorry, what do you mean by that?
So who funds the Samara Center for Democracy? Where is, what's driving your work? Is it funded by private parties? How is the Samara Center for Democracy supported, and what prompts your work?
Yeah, we're funded through a number of ways, whether that's we are a registered charity. We're funded by donations, large and small, from different Canadians or groups. And then some of our projects are sometimes funded by different grants or things of that nature. So that's how we're able to do the work that we do, and we're thankful for it.
Excellent. I did get a chat question earlier too, to say, as you look at misinformation and disinformation online, have you seen direct impacts in political candidates switching their messaging to misinformation or disinformation online? Have there been instances where candidates are responding to this online?
Are responding, do you mean sorry, I didn't see the question, but do you mean where candidates are responding to misinformation to try to debunk it?
Yep.
Yeah, for sure. And we've seen that within Canada and outside of Canada too. And it is a challenge for candidates, because it can really pull their attention and their resources away from or just elected officials in general. It can pull their attention and resources away from the actual work they're trying to do and the messages they're trying to get out. So it can be frustrating and frankly time consuming, especially during an election campaign, to try to debunk this mis and disinformation that's maybe shared about them or their party or their views. And so something that we've seen internationally is politicians or political groups trying to do something called pre-bunking, which is to try to get ahead of dis and misinformation as much as they can, and to try to hypothesize what kind of misinformation could be shared about maybe them or their platform or their initiatives or their views, and try to just debunk it before anybody can get there. And that's been shown to be really successful in a lot of cases, to just kind of catch things before they can even become a problem. So I think that's going to probably become increasingly a strategy, not only for political candidates, but just for anybody involved with public life in general, to just try to figure out what disinformation might get spread about them before it even happens.
Oh, that's great. And pre-bunking perfectly describes my efforts to bring my report cards to my parents. I'm going to take a second now to go to the next question, which is, do you have any stop, drop, and roll style quick steps to ensure that folks are doing due diligence on information verification and being digital bystanders? Like quick tips on, due diligence, if you will.
Yeah, for sure. I'm going to talk for 1 second about generative AI, and there's a lot of these new technologies that can very quickly and easily and cheaply generate fake images, fake videos, things called deep fakes, where it appears as if somebody is doing something in a video that's not actually real. These are fabricated videos, or technology that can fake someone's voice and have an audio recording that maybe sounds like a politician, sounds like an elected official, but really isn't something that they said. And so this is forms of disinformation that can be created really easily and increasingly easier. And a lot of people are very confident that they can identify what kinds of media are artificially generated like that, but don't recognize that we're now at a point where this technology, when it's done at the higher levels, at the more expert levels, is really not, people can't discern it from reality. They're able to create, disinformation agents are able to create videos or audio or images that no one can really frankly tell if they're real or not. And so I think it's really important for people to recognize that that's our new reality, that no matter what you see, you can't really know if it's real unless you understand where it's sourced from. So that would be kind of, I don't know if that quite answers your question on like a quick stop, drop, and roll thing, but I would just, if you ever see, video, piece of audio, an image that you're like, that gives you any sort of pause, I would say your first thing should be, hey, what's the source on this? And hey, are there diverse sources on this that I can find, easily online to try to identify if this is fake or not? Because just looking at it, you're not going to be able to tell anymore necessarily, frankly. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. The next question, Chad, is how can we combat the spread of fake news generated by bots, right? So, Tom, effectively being that bystander, what's the way to stop it? What would you recommend there?
Yeah, that's really difficult. It is a difficult thing. I think a lot of people online, like for an individual solution, something I've seen a lot is that a lot of people online will see people sharing misinformation or abuse or whatever, and they'll still frequently engage with it through reactions. Like I'm thinking on Facebook, if somebody shares a piece of misinformation and then people are angry reacting it because they disagree, they're like, no, this isn't real. What they're doing in the process is they're helping boost that disinformation by disagreeing with it. So sometimes not engaging can really help reduce the spread of some of this fake news or information that isn't real. But at the same time, I would just say, try to put yourself into media environments that are positive, that are decently moderated. I'm thinking in terms of like Facebook groups or Reddit communities, places where like that fake news is not allowed, is deleted, because then you'll be less susceptible to that kinds of content. Yeah. You're muted, sorry, Rahul.
Good call. I have a couple of quick questions in the chat, and I think that's just more along the work that Samara Center, as well as a person that has their hand raised. So, what type of expertise or, what type of specializations are needed to do the sort of research that you're doing? And I'm going to link that also to whether your reports have been presented to governments and have you gone into high schools talking about it. So effectively, what's the expertise that brings you to do this sort of work? And then what do you do with the work?
Yeah, for sure. So we have a diverse team at the Samara Center, coming from different social science backgrounds. All of our research team. My background particularly is in public policy and communications and studying technology and how it influences society. And so that's kind of the background that I've come from to get into this role. And so it's really that kind of social science expertise, but also just like this curiosity about what people are talking about and what people's experiences are online. And so our reports have been presented to government in the past. Our CEO Sabrina has spoken to the PROC committee in the federal government a handful of times to talk about some of these issues, and we've also had, you know, in the past different federal or provincial elected officials who have engaged with our reports or said that they've read them or have commented on them. So we do have some engagement there for sure. And as for high schools, I mean, I haven't gone directly into high schools, but I actually recently talked to a room full of about 100 high school students about issues very similar to this presentation today, and talked to them, had kind of a big discussion about, you know, what are these online threats that they're facing and online harms that they're facing. And it's really interesting to hear the perspectives of those young people, and it helps inform our research a lot. So we definitely have a desire to talk to more young folks about this, to you know, do more of these kinds of sessions in schools, at universities, and libraries like this, to kind of spread the word and to have more good conversations.
There, I'm on mute again. We are at time, so I want to thank everybody here. I do see that there is a participant who had raised their hand. So I'd like to invite them to unmute and ask a final question. But you know, for anyone who's willing and free to stay along, that'd be great. But that'll be the final question we take for the day.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I lowered my hand because you said that we had run out of time. But yeah, hopefully this is a fairly quick question. I was just wondering, when you were analyzing the previous elections, like Alberta provincial, Ottawa municipal, and that Toronto by-election, you mentioned that issues, basically the topic of LGBTQ plus issues, kind of had the most buzz around them. So I was wondering, when you were doing that research, did you also take into consideration the candidates' personal profiles? And I guess I have a more personal connection in the sense that I lived in Ottawa during the 2022 election. And so I remember, you know, a couple of the candidates, especially for mayor and like one of the school boards, belonging to the LGBTQ plus community. And so even if the issue wasn't brought up itself, just the candidates' personal profiles kind of sparked those conversations. And so I was wondering, like, did that make an impact in how you arrived at your conclusion, or like, how did that part of your research go?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for the question and for the thoughtful question. So that absolutely helped inform, you know, helped us kind of identify where these things were happening. The way that we were able to do that analysis was, you know, we're very limited in what kind of data that we receive, but we were able to see, you know, just charting engagement and abuse over time, and doing that on like an individual level. So looking at specific candidates of where these, you know, lines of increased or decreased engagement day by day during the election period were going, helped us kind of identify where that engagement and abuse was happening. And so we would see on days where people would maybe post, where candidates would maybe post something about a pride event, or post about, you know, a new rainbow crosswalk, rainbow crossing in their community, or something like that, that there would be this really big increased spike in engagement and abuse. And so like exactly what you said, a couple of those candidates, whether that was in the Ottawa election or the Toronto, or not the Toronto, but the Alberta election, who actually, you know, identified as part of those communities, were part of that analysis, and we saw that they received that increased engagement and abuse pretty regularly around anytime they would mention those topics. And then to a different degree, other folks who would mention those topics would also receive that. But also, there were candidates who were actively inspiring hate and opposition towards the LGBTQ plus communities, who we also saw were getting that elevated engagement and abuse whenever they would talk about issues related to those communities. So that was kind of how we were able to do that analysis and identify it. But we certainly think through our research and just research that we've seen elsewhere that it's an increasingly difficult time for any of those equity-deserving, equity-seeking groups to become elected officials, to run for office. Certainly, LGBTQ plus folks have some really, really significant barriers right now surrounding, this increasing amount of hate that they're receiving on and offline.
Okay, excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. I appreciate you joining us again, and I thank everybody for joining us today for our first Fact Checkers presentation. Join us next month. You'll see the program listed on our online calendar, and we look forward to seeing you all there. And have a great day, and all the best with the next few weeks with the election season. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody, and thanks to the Vaughan Public Libraries for having me, and Rahul, thanks for helping facilitate this session. This was a lot of fun. So thanks, and have a great night, everybody.